The courtroom was already impatient. People shifted in their seats. Papers rustled. A bored clerk yawned behind the bench. And at the defendant's table, a man sat completely still. His jacket was old. Not dirty, just worn. The kind of jacket that had seen winters, rain, and years no one bothered to count. His hair was streaked with gray. His shoulders slightly slumped. To anyone watching, he looked like another tired nobody wasting the court's time. That's when the judge leaned forward, adjusted his glasses, and smirked. "Sir," the judge said loudly, "are you planning to answer the court today or just sit there pretending this matters?" A few people laughed. The man didn't. He simply lifted his eyes. Calm, silent, unbothered. And that calm would soon destroy the entire courtroom. The courtroom was already impatient. People shifted in their seats. Papers rustled. A bored clerk yawned behind the bench. And at the defendant's table, a man sat completely still. His jacket was old. Not dirty, just worn. The kind of jacket that had seen winters, rain, and years no one bothered to count. His hair was streaked with gray. His shoulders slightly slumped. To anyone watching, he looked like another tired nobody wasting the court's time. That's when the judge leaned forward, adjusted his glasses, and smirked. "Sir," the judge said loudly, "are you planning to answer the court today or just sit there pretending this matters?" A few people laughed. The man didn't. He simply lifted his eyes. Calm, silent, unbothered. And that calm would soon destroy the entire courtroom. The clerk cleared her throat. Case number 4179. The State versus Daniel Harper. Daniel Harper. No flashy lawyer beside him. No family in the audience. Just him. Charged with disorderly conduct, failure to comply with a lawful order, resisting arrest, nonviolent. It sounded routine. The prosecutor stood confidently. "Your Honor, the defendant was removed from a public memorial event after refusing to leave restricted grounds. When approached by officers, he became uncooperative." The judge nodded, already bored. "Another one who thinks rules don't apply," he muttered, loud enough for the room to hear. More chuckles. Daniel Harper remained silent. The judge looked directly at Daniel. "Mr. Harper," he said, tapping his pen, "you look exhausted, lost, like life's already beaten you." He leaned back. "So let's save time. Guilty or not guilty?" Daniel stood slowly. His knees creaked, not from age alone, but from something deeper. "Not guilty, Your Honor." His voice was steady, controlled. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Really?" He scanned Daniel from head to toe. The old boots, the faded jacket. "And what's your excuse?" Daniel paused. "I was invited to attend the memorial." The judge laughed. "Invited?" He glanced at the prosecutor. "You hear that? Invited." The room laughed again. The judge waved his hand dismissively. "This isn't a charity event, Mr. Harper. This is a court of law." The prosecutor stepped in. "Your Honor, the officers on scene report that the defendant claimed he had a right to be there." The judge scoffed. "A right?" He leaned forward again. "Mr. Harper, you don't look like someone with many rights left to claim." That one hit. Even the clerk stopped typing. Daniel's jaw tightened, just slightly, but he said nothing. The judge continued. "Let me guess. Hard life, made some bad choices, and now the system's against you." He shook his head. I've seen your type. Daniel slowly raised his eyes. For the record, Your Honor, he said calmly, I served this country. Silence. Then laughter. Not everyone, but enough. The judge smiled thinly. Oh, of course you did. He leaned back again. Let me guess. Special forces, secret missions, classified, right? More laughter. The judge sighed theatrically. Mr. Harper, if every man who claimed to serve actually did, we wouldn't have space in this courtroom. He glanced at the bailiff. Do you see a uniform on him? The bailiff shook his head. No, Your Honor. The judge nodded. No uniform, no proof, just a story. Daniel inhaled slowly, then reached into his jacket pocket. The judge snapped. Absolutely not. Hands where I can see them. Daniel froze, slowly raised his hands. I wasn't reaching for a weapon, he said calmly. I was reaching for permission. The judge scoffed. To do what? Show us a receipt? Laughter again. But Daniel's eyes never left the judge. Daniel lowered his hands. Your Honor, he said quietly, I don't usually speak about my service. The judge cut him off. Then don't start now. A pause. The judge leaned forward, irritated. You know what I see? I see a worn-out man hiding behind a story because he doesn't want consequences. Daniel nodded once. Understood. The judge raised his gavel slightly. Good, and this will be quick. And that's when something unexpected happened. From the back row, a woman stood up. Your Honor, she said sharply. The judge snapped his head around. Sit down. This is not... She held up a laminated badge. Not police, not court staff, something else. I believe the court should hear him. The judge frowned. And who exactly are you? She swallowed. My name is Sarah Mitchell. She looked at Daniel. And that man saved my life. A murmur spread. The judge frowned deeply. This is highly irregular. Sarah stepped forward. 14 years ago, she said, voice shaking. I was deployed overseas. My convoy was hit. Daniel closed his eyes. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. Sarah continued. He pulled me out of a burning vehicle while under fire. The judge scoffed. Stories, again. Sarah's voice hardened. You want proof? She pointed. Ask him about the scar on his shoulder. Daniel stiffened. The judge leaned forward again. What scar? Daniel slowly rolled his shoulder. Just enough for the collar of his jacket to slip. A thin, jagged scar appeared. The room went quiet. Daniel reached into his jacket again. This time, no one stopped him. Slowly, carefully, he pulled out a small, worn velvet box. The judge squinted. What is that? Daniel opened it. Inside, a medal. Not shiny, not decorative, heavy, scarred, real. Gasps filled the room. Daniel's voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't wear it, he said. Because I didn't think it mattered anymore. He looked up. I guess I was wrong. No one spoke. Not the prosecutor. Not the clerk. Not even the judge. The small velvet box sat open in Daniel Harper's hand, like something alive, something breathing. The metal didn't shine. It didn't need to. It carried weight. The judge stared at it longer than he should have, then cleared his throat. "Mr. Harper," he said slowly, "what exactly is that?" Daniel didn't look down. "Silver Star," he said, "for gallantry in action." A murmur swept through the courtroom. This time, not laughter. Shock. Disbelief. Respect. The judge's jaw tightened. "That's a serious claim." Daniel nodded once. So was the war. The prosecutor stood abruptly. "Your Honor," he said, forcing a smile, "with all due respect, medals can be purchased. Replicas exist." Daniel finally looked at him. Not angry, just tired. "I know," Daniel said. "I buried friends who never got one." The room went still again. The prosecutor swallowed. Well, then the state requests verification." Daniel nodded. "Of course." He turned slightly. "And I already asked for it." The courtroom doors creaked open. Every head turned. A man stepped inside, straight-backed, impeccably dressed. Dark green uniform, rows of medals across his chest. The bailiff instinctively stood straighter. The clerk stopped typing. The judge's face drained of color. The man spoke clearly. "Colonel James Whitaker," he said, "United States Army." He looked directly at Daniel. "At ease, Sergeant Major Harper." The room gasped. The judge stumbled to his feet. "Sergeant Major?" Colonel Whitaker nodded. "Retired," he said, "after 26 years of service." He faced the judge. "Decorated, multiple tours, combat leadership." The judge looked at Daniel again. The worn-out man, the nobody, now something else entirely. The judge swallowed hard. Why wasn't this disclosed?" Daniel answered before the colonel could. "Because I wasn't on trial for my service." The colonel turned to the court. "For clarity," he said, "I'd like to explain why Sergeant Major Harper was at the memorial." The judge nodded quickly. "Please." The colonel continued. "He was invited as a speaker." Gasps. He declined. More gasps. But he attended anyway, quietly. Daniel looked down. "The memorial was for my unit," he said softly. "I didn't want the microphone." The colonel nodded. When officers ordered him to leave, they did not verify his credentials. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. "And when he refused?" "He didn't refuse," the colonel said firmly. "He asked for time." The colonel produced a flash drive. Body cam footage. The judge nodded eagerly. "Play it." The screen flickered on. Daniel appeared, standing calmly, hands visible, voice steady. "I'm not causing trouble," he said on screen. "I just want a moment." An officer shoved him. Another cuffed him. The courtroom watched in silence. Sarah Mitchell wiped tears from her face. The judge closed his eyes. The video ended. The judge cleared his throat again. Well, emotions run high at public events. Colonel Whitaker's eyes hardened. So does accountability. The judge flinched. I believe, the colonel continued, you owe this man an apology. Silence. The judge hesitated, then forced a smile. Mr. Harper, if my words earlier were... Daniel raised his hand. Don't. The judge froze. I didn't come here for words, Daniel said. I came here because I was ordered to. The colonel stepped forward. Your Honor, he said, are you aware of Judicial Conduct Rule 3B? The judge blinked. Mockery, the colonel said. Public humiliation. The judge sat down slowly. The room could feel it now. The power had moved. The colonel wasn't finished. 3 complaints, he said. 2 sealed. The judge's head snapped up. How do you? Military legal liaison, the colonel replied. We watch. The judge's face went pale. Daniel finally spoke again. I never wanted this, he said quietly, but respect matters. The judge straightened his robe. All charges dismissed. A wave of relief moved through the room, but Daniel didn't smile. The colonel leaned in. Dismissed doesn't erase. The judge nodded slowly. No, he admitted, it doesn't. Something unexpected happened. One by one, people stood. Not ordered, not asked. They stood for Daniel Harper. He looked around, confused, then embarrassed. Please, he said softly, sit. No one did. The judge slowly lowered his gaze. For the first time since the session began, he didn't look powerful. He looked human, flawed. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the gavel. The same gavel he had used to mock, to belittle, to control. Now it felt heavier. Court, he began. His voice cracked. Court is in recess. The gavel came down. Not with authority, but with surrender. Behind closed doors, the judge removed his robe. It slid off his shoulders like a lie finally exposed. Colonel Whitaker stood near the window. Daniel remained by the door, silent. The judge cleared his throat. I owe you an apology, he said. Daniel didn't respond. The judge tried again. I shouldn't have spoken the way I did. Daniel finally looked at him. People like me, he said calmly, hear that tone every day. The judge swallowed. I didn't know. Daniel shook his head. That's the problem. Colonel Whitaker spoke quietly. Do you know what Sergeant Major Harper did after retiring? The judge shook his head. He volunteered. Daniel looked away. Burn victims, PTSD units, families of the fallen. The judge's shoulders dropped. And today, the colonel continued, you called him a nobody. Silence pressed hard against the walls. Courtroom doors opened. Cameras flashed instantly. News fans, reporters shouting, "Judge, comment on the veteran incident." Daniel stopped. He squinted at the light. It felt louder than gunfire. The colonel stepped forward. "No comments." Daniel hesitated, then raised a hand. "I'll say one thing." The crowd went silent. "I didn't come for attention," Daniel said. "I came to remember my friends." That was all. 2 weeks later, a judicial review panel convened. Not public, but thorough. The judge sat alone at a long table. No gavel, no bench, just questions. His words replayed on a screen. Mockery, laughter. Silence followed. The decision was unanimous. The judge cleaned out his office quietly. Framed degrees, awards, photos. He paused at one picture. Himself, younger, shaking a veteran's hand. He stared at it for a long time, then turned it face down. That night, Daniel sat alone in his apartment. Lights off. Metal in his hand. For the first time, he shook. His breath came uneven. The weight finally arrived. Not the courtroom, not the judge, the memories. He whispered names, one by one, then cried. The next morning, a knock. Sarah stood outside. She saluted. Perfect. Daniel returned, slow, respectful. "I never thanked you," she said. "You did," Daniel replied. "You lived." Weeks later, the memorial was quiet. Flags, names, no speeches. Daniel stood before the stone, placed his medal down, just for a moment, then picked it up again. "I'll carry it," he whispered, "for all of you." Respect isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It simply remembers. Daniel walked away, not celebrated, not praised, but finally seen. Some heroes don't ask to be honored. They ask to be treated like humans.